Well, whenever you're going to pick a blank, you want to first of all decide what you want the blank to do. You know, do you want the blank to move a heavy fish? Do you want the blank to protect a light line? What do you want the blank to do? You've got all kinds of actions. You've got fast actions, you've got modern actions, you've got slow actions. But one of them is for what you want that blank to do. Let's say that you want a blank to fish for bass with. You're going to fish with a 15-pound test on a small bass. Well, you need a very fast action blank. You need a blank that has a lot of power in the butt of the rod to be able to move that fish before he gets wrapped around. If you're going to be fishing for something like a trout or steelhead or something like this, where you're going to fish a very large fish on a light line, then you're going to want more of a softer action, more of a forgiving action to protect those knots in the blanks. We're going to spine a blank now. This is the very first step in manufacturing a rod. We'll take a piece of tape and wrap it around the middle of the blank. Spine is very important on a fishing rod because this enables you to be able to cast a line or a lure very straight. This enables you to be able to have the power on the back of the rod to be able to set the hook or to be able to lift the line out of the water if it happens to be a fly rod or whatever. What we're going to do is take the blank, bend the blank in the natural bend, find the area where it bent, place a finger there, place it down on a 45 on some hard surface, and rotate the blank until you can find the blank flopping over or seeking its lower level. Now we're going to mark the blank on the area that we're going to place the guides. For instance, if it's going to be a spinning or a fly rod, the guides would go on the bottom, we'll mark it on the bottom. If it's going to be a casting rod, we're going to mark them on the top. This particular blank we're going to build for you today is going to be a casting rod, so we're going to mark this right here on the top, just like this. Now, during our manufacturing, we'll always know where these guides go. You can also take the blank and sight down the blank, and you'll see a gentle up swing to the blank. This will enable you to know that you did check your spine correctly.
Once we've found the spine of the blank, we're now ready to install the handle. There are various handle kits available today, some of which are cork, or we have our foam grip. It's just a personal preference, whichever you prefer. This particular rod that we will be putting the handle on today is a steelhead rod, so we've picked a handle kit that has a graphite trigger and is all cork. Some of the things that we will be using today to put the handle on will be alcohol solvent. You can also use acetone, epoxy glue, the long curing type, a brush, a mixing stick, a mixing cup, tapered reamer or a rat tail file, some paper towels, or a piece of newspaper. Now we go to ream out the rear grip. Now the important thing to remember is that we keep rotating the rear grip as we are reaming it out in order to keep the hole centered and straight rather than in an oblong or egg-shaped position, and keep checking to make sure that we don't ream out too much onto the blank. Now you notice that we have applied some masking tape over the butt end to keep the end from splitting out, and it's a good idea to also apply some masking tape at this end for the rear hood when we go to glue it into place. Okay, we've got a good fit there. Next we go ahead and size up the trigger. Now we've got a good fit on the trigger. Next we take the mid body and we've reamed it out and got it in the fit that we need. Barrel assembly, make sure that that fits properly. Take the foregrip, do the same thing with the foregrip. Remember to keep turning and twisting the reamer as well as the foregrip as you are removing cork. Keep checking. Now if you've gotten a little bit too much material out, remember that you can build up the blank with masking tape. Okay, we've got a good fit there. It's very important that we make sure we have a good dry fit before we go mixing the glue. And now we want to rough up the blank a little bit, knock that shiny part of the finish off so that we get a good bond with the epoxy glue. Now you're going to pick up a little bit of residue, so we'll just take some of that off with the acetone or the alcohol solvent. Wipe it down good. Now we're ready to mix our glue. This will be a 1-to-1 two-part mix, and we'll be using roughly about 1 gram of glue for this rod. And it's very important that you try to get as close as you can to the graduations on the mixing cup. And we'll take our mixing stick and go ahead and mix it up. Again, don't worry about the bubbles that you will mix into this glue because it does not affect the bonding of it. This particular glue we're using was made specifically for rod building. It's a little more flexible than the stuff you get at the hardware store. Okay, now we're ready to glue the rear grip into place. Now again, remember that you don't need to coat the whole blank. Just take your brush, load it up with some glue, and draw one heavy line of glue down the blank, like we've done here. Now that you've got that, remember, as you are pushing the rear grip over the blank, twist the blank, and this will coat the whole blank underneath the rear grip. Slide it into place. Now you may push some excess glue up in front of you, so in order to keep things clean, go ahead and glue the butt cap on at the same time. And we can do that by, it takes very little glue to glue the butt cap on. Put a little bit on the inside of the cap, a little bit on the inside of the blank, and again, as you put it on, twist it to make sure you get some glue all the way around it. I'm going to apply masking tape on the butt cap to kind of keep it in place until it is dry. There you go. Okay, now we're ready to glue the trigger into place. Now the important thing about the hood being glued onto the trigger is to make sure that we have plenty of glue on the inside of the trigger, on the inside of the hood I mean. Go ahead and put the hood on, turn it in place so that you have the top of the hood in line with the top of the trigger, and you can force it down. Now we're going to slide it onto the blank. And we want to make sure that we get some glue inside this counterbore that is in the rear grip. If you can see that. And apply it around the outside of the blank. Just to make sure, we'll put a little bit of glue on the outside of the hood, especially on top of the hood. We don't want any cork to chip away from it once it's dried. All right, now we got it in place. Now we check to make sure that the top of the trigger is in line with the spine that we had found earlier, and it is. If it wasn't, it's very easy at this point to go ahead and twist the rear grip into any position you want. Now we just repeat the process with the mid-body. Remember to twist the mid-body as you're pushing it down into place. There you go. Now the threaded barrel assembly, the same thing. Now I prefer to put a little bit of glue on the inside of the barrel rather than on this cork part of it, because as you push this on, if you had put all the glue on the cork barrel, it would have pushed it ahead and made a big mess. This way here, you're still getting glue where you need it, and it's not so messy. Now we've got the foregrip. Same thing, put a little bit of glue there. As you're pushing it down, twist it. There we go. Now the only thing we have left to do is put the winding check in place, and we don't need to worry about gluing the winding check in because it does stretch considerably and will hold itself in place. And when we go to put finish over it, it'll keep it there anyway. Now we've got the handle all glued up. Now it's just a matter of cleanup. Again, we'll use our acetone or alcohol solvent. Get all that excess glue And again, what we want to do is keep all the components in the correct place. So we'll use this tape again. Put a piece on the foregrip, push down, and glue it onto the rear grip. Okay, Gary, we've got this handle glued up, and we're ready now to pick out the guides that we're going to be putting on this handle. Basically, very quickly, what is the difference between the guides that are available today, and what would make us choose one set over the other for this steelhead rod that we're going to be building?
Well, there's a lot of different guides, Ken. There's your brass chrome guides, which are the older type guides, which are very nice for spinning and light type work, especially in a noodle rod. Keep your guides very light, keep the numbers down, but don't underguide your rod. Don't overguide it, don't underguide it. That's a very important factor in it. Through the fly, through the snake guides, today we're going to go ahead and come down here to a NHG guide, which is a silicon carbide guide, which we'll go ahead and wrap for them today. I really feel that this is probably the best guide that they're going for the steelhead rods.
Okay.
I think next is spining. You know, we've already spined the blank. We've already got our marks so that we know exactly where they all line up. Now what we want to do is to flex the blanks to figure out exactly where the guides go. Do you want to go ahead and go on with that, or you want to?
Well, we've determined the spine of the blank already, right? When we glued the handle up. So we've got that position taken care of. One of the important things to remember in where to put these guides would be, keep in mind there are some constants that we can use, and that is that this first butt guide is going to be roughly between 20 and 25 inches from the face of your reel. So let's go ahead and take a measurement, and you can use a China marker. That usually works the best.
Yeah, the white one.
The white one, yes, up against the graphite, or they have black ones. If you're wrapping a fiberglass blank that's white or yellow, you can use black. Anyway, take a mark, say at 22 inches from the face of your reel.
Okay, I'll mark it with just this pencil right here today.
Okay, now another constant we're going to have is, being that this is a two-piece rod, we're going to have to establish a guide on the tip section. So this first guide that will be on the tip will be on an average between 3.5 and 5.5 inches from the tip.
Okay, what I like to do on that too, Ken, is when you flex that blank, you get that tip flexed in a good bend. Hold on to the butt of that. You get that flexed in the good bend. What you want to do is be very careful where you put your guides, because as you can see, where I put those guides, I can pull that drastic bend out. So when you said 3 to 5 inches, I kind of ratio that in between where I want that one main guide. So if I have to find that this blank is bent into that angle there and I need a guide here, I can come down into this point here, I can space it out. Let's say it's here. I've got 9 inches. I can go ahead and put it at 4. Then my next guide would be 5, and I can progressively back these guides off.
Okay, so then you're saying the critical guide on the tip section is going back again to flexing the rod and finding the place where it bends the most, and making sure that we get a guide as close to that point as possible.
That's right. That will really increase the strength of that rod through the fishing.
Okay, that sounds good. And another guide that we might want to consider would be, being that it is a two-piece rod, as close to the ferrule as we can get it.
That's right.
Okay.
That'll be in the ferrule area. You put a guide in the ferrule area, you'll have the least effect of that weight of that guide throughout the action of your rod.
So these guides, wherever they're put on the rod, they are eliminating the stress of the rod bend.
Sure, they sure are.
Okay.
Okay, and really kind of a rule of thumb too is a guide per foot of the rod. So if you've got a 9-foot rod, we want 9 guides, and again you can go 9 to 8 to 10, just right in there. It gives you a very good average. A lot of times the manufacturers will come up with a guide that the feet are bent a little crooked. You can take a pair of needle nose pliers or whatever, straighten these feet up so that they lay flat against the blank. It's very hard to get that line up over the top of the guide, of the foot of the guide. So what I usually do is take a file or a grinder or a piece, if the wife has an emery board or something like this, you can use that. And file that, the very end of that guide down to the point of time that it's nice and sharp, and you get the burr cleaned off the bottom of that guide so that when it lays down against that blank it doesn't scratch it.
In other words, you don't want to feel any sharp edges with your hand that might cut the thread or
That's right. When you do this, round it off over the side there.
Okay.
Okay, now let's show them how to start a guide, Ken.
Now when you put the tape over the foot of the guide, make sure that you put the tape closer to the ring so that you leave a little bit of the foot sticking out to wrap on.
And when you're laying these guides down on this, be careful that they're as close as you can to your reel seat, because after we wrap them on, we don't want to have to move them too far on the blank.
Right. Okay, now some of the thread tension devices that we can use on this, very simple as an ordinary book, say a heavy book, a encyclopedia, a catalog, and just take the thread, and by running it through the pages at various thicknesses, you can increase the tension of your thread. And then you can just take the spool thread that you have left and take one a coffee cup and lay it in a coffee cup, and it'll come out of there pretty clean. And you can feel that we do have a good,
yeah, that's nice.
That good tension.
Nice, even.
Very smooth, and that's important on rod building. Now, in starting the basic wrap on rod building, the first thing you want to do is lay the thread over the blank and wrap it to the side that you're wrapping to. In other words, we're going to be wrapping to the right side. So what you want to do is, as you lay this thread over the blank, over the top of the blank, bring it around and bring it on the right side of your thread, okay? And you can do that 2 or 3 times. Just go ahead and wrap it around 2 or 3 times. Now, when you've reached the point where the 2 threads meet each other, go ahead and put your thumb on there and hold the tension of the thread onto the blank. And then just, you can take your finger or moving the blank over and slowly roll the blank to cross over the 2 or 3 wraps that you started with, making sure that your loose end of the thread remains on the right hand side as you are wrapping. Now you can see we're just taking it nice and easy and working towards the foot of the guide. You can take your thumbnail and push it, pack the threads, eliminate any of the gaps that you have there. Just go ahead and start wrapping it. When you get about 8 to 10 wraps over your loose end, go ahead and cut it out of the way. You can either use your fingernail clippers or scissors on that. A loop of monofilament. Now you cut yourself off a piece about say 6 inches or so. Put an overhead knot in one end. Okay, and this loop we'll be using to pull the thread through or to finish the wrap off. Just go ahead and wrap up to the tape. When you get to that point, remove the tape and go ahead and finish your wrap. Now when you get to within about 1/8 of an inch of the brace of the guide, we'll do this a little faster to get to that point, we take the monofilament loop or the thread loop, whichever you've got, and what you want to do is you want to bring it up underneath the thread and slide it up on top of the blank. And when you do that properly, it'll stay there by itself.
And making sure that the loop is on the end that you're going to pull through.
Again, you want the loop to be going the same direction that you're wrapping, on this point on the right hand side, okay? And you're going to wrap roughly about 8 to 10 wraps over that loop, all right? And we've put the loop directly opposite the guide because that's going to give us the maximum amount of pressure.
It also is a lot neater to have all of the tie-offs on the back.
That's right. Now when you get it completely wrapped, go ahead and put your thumb on it to hold the tension. Cut your thread. Put the end of the thread through your loop. And take your other end of your loop and pull your loose end through. Now you've got it, it's holding it in place, and we finished the basic wrap. You can go ahead and give it an additional tug to tighten things up. Use your thumb again to pack any loose threads we might have in there. And you can take your razor blade, lay it flat on the windings, put a little pressure or tension on this loose end, and clip it off, and you're done. Now we're ready to go ahead and start with our hook keeper. We want the hook keeper on the right side. So we got, and fairly close to the winding check. And once again, we start this wrap the same as we did for the guide wrap. You bring the thread over the blank. We're wrapping to the right side, so we take the loose end on the right side of the main wrap 3 times, hold tension on it, and cross the main thread over those 3 wraps, still keeping tension on that loose end. And go ahead and wrap 8 more wraps. When we get to our 8th wrap, we'll go ahead and cut that loose end away. And continue on. Now with the hook keeper, we don't have as much of a foot to wrap on, so instead of 1/8 of an inch, it's going to be roughly about 1/16 of an inch. Bury your loop. Now again, remember we're wrapping to the right, so we put the loop on the right side. Continue on with your wrapping. Hold the thread, release the tension, cut the thread, put it in the loop, and pull the loop through.
Do the collar wraps, and then we can show them how to put the decal on. I think that's the next thing we should do. Okay, there's 2 types of decals that I know of, one of them being a pressure-sensitive decal like this one, which you just rip off the backing, and then when you do apply it without your fingerprints being on the back side. Just apply this decal down, and then take something like the back of a razor blade or your fingernail clippers and just rub it back and forth, and you can apply it very, very evenly. The other type of decal that there is what we call a water decal, which is seeming to be what most of the quality manufacturers are going to. And this in here you want to soak in warm water for just a short period of time until you can feel the decal starting to loosen on the backing. When you get ready to apply this, when you see that it moves, you just take the decal, lay it down on there, put your finger onto the decal in the area that you want it on, and then just slide the paper out from under it. Straightening the decal up, then taking some type of a light sponge and wiping over the top of the decal to wipe the air bubbles out of it. Okay, and putting the tip top on, I like to put a little bit of the glue on the tip of the rod, a little bit down in the end of the tip top, sliding it on with a little bit of a turn to make sure that the glue does stay in the end of the tip top, cleaning the excess glue off, then taking a little piece of masking tape and putting it on over the top of the tip top and onto the blank. Now we can rotate it up and make sure that our tip top is in line with the guides, and then fold the tape on. Okay, now we've got to line these guides to make sure all these guides are right straight in line. And we can just take them and move them just a little bit here after they get wrapped to make sure that the guides are all nice and lined. Just twist them a little bit and slide them in with a thread, and they'll just slide right on around. Don't create too much force on them, but just enough to move them very gently, each one of them.
Gary, looks like the rod is now ready for some color preserver. The color preserver that we're using today is a water-based color preserver. Now we'll be taking about 2 to 3 coats of color preserver with about an hour's worth of drying time between coats. And you'll be able to tell that you're getting enough color preserver on it and that the thread will turn completely translucent. And don't be concerned about that, because as the thread dries, it will return to its original color. Well, Gary, looks like we're about ready for some finish on this rod. There's several finishes available on the market today. The one that we will be using today will be the Palomar type finish, which is a 1-to-1 ratio. This particular finish has syringes used for the mixing, which makes it very, very simple to get the exact amount, which is very important. We'll use about 3 cc's of finish for this rod. All right.
In this, they've color-coded the two sides so that there's no way you can mix them up, and even after you do use one of them, you really don't have to clean them up too well, because unless you do mix up the syringes, the other ones won't harden. When you're mixing this stuff, you want to be very careful to mix it with something like a round stir stick, because you don't want to turn any bubbles into it, which you could turn into with something like a flat stick. The mixing of this is very important, that you want to mix it enough to be able to blend these two parts together, because if you don't, you may have a problem with the setup of the finish on your rod.
Now when you go to apply the finish, don't be afraid to really load it on there. This finish is self-leveling, so we're not too concerned about getting it on even right now. When you apply it onto the thread, just cover the outside edge of the thread just a little bit and turn the rod as you've got the brush on the thread. We've got the label on there, so we can coat right over the label. When we get finished, it will look like the label was part of the blank. Also, by the way we are brushing it here, the bubbles that we had mixed into the finish will now come to the surface and pop. Whenever you're putting any finish on a guide or on the hook keeper, I always like to start by putting a dab right on the foot of it to allow that thread around the foot of the guide to absorb the most amount of finish. If you don't do this, you'll sometimes have a tendency to trap air underneath that foot that will come out in the form of a bubble as the finish is drying. Okay, once we've applied the finish onto the guides, now is the critical time where we need to watch the finish, and we want to watch for any runs or any drooping of the finish. And with this type of thread finish we have here, it's going to take about 40 minutes before the finish will be completely dry. So what we want to do is start off with set the guide in the upright position and put a little timer on for about 10-15 minutes, then come back and flop the guide in the down position. And this finish is self-leveling so that it will level itself out and continue to, as it's curing, eliminate the bubbles. It will correct itself up to about an hour and a half, but after that point, it can cloudy up the finish somewhat.
Okay, well, thank you very much.